The sound of gunfire shattered the evening stillness as Katherine Reynolds ducked behind an overturned wagon, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged bird seeking freedom. Dust swirled through the air of Silverdale, Colorado, the small mining town she'd called home for the past year. It was 1876, and the West was still wild, perhaps wilder than she had ever imagined when she'd left Boston behind. "Stay down, miss," someone shouted from nearby. Through the haze, she could make out the silhouette of a man returning fire, his movements precise and controlled amidst the chaos. Katherine clutched her father's journal to her chest, the leather binding worn and familiar against her trembling fingers. The deed hidden within its pages was the reason men were dying tonight, the reason her small newspaper office had been ransacked 3 times in the past month. When the shooting finally stopped, Katherine peeked out from behind her shelter. Bodies lay in the street, some moaning, some terrifyingly still. The stranger who had returned fire approached her, holstering his gun with practiced ease. "You all right, madam?" he asked, extending a hand to help her up. Katherine accepted his assistance, noting the calluses on his palm and the quiet strength in his grip. "Yes, thank you, I'm Katherine Reynolds." "Owen Carter," he replied, tipping his hat. His eyes, the color of storm clouds, assessed her quickly. "You're bleeding." Katherine glanced down at her sleeve where a bullet had grazed her arm. "It's nothing," she said, though the sting was beginning to register through her fading adrenaline. "Doesn't look like nothing to me," Owen said. "Let's get you patched up before those boys come back with reinforcements." "Those boys," Katherine repeated, her voice hardening as she brushed dust from her skirt. "You mean Albert Harrington's men? They want this." She held up the journal. "And they'll keep coming until they get it." Owen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those gray eyes. "Harrington, the mining baron, the very same," Katherine confirmed. "He's been trying to drive me out of town since I started publishing articles about his treatment of miners." Owen glanced around at the empty street, at the townspeople who had scattered at the first sound of gunfire, doors and shutters slamming closed all around them. "Seems like you could use some help, Miss Reynolds." Katherine squared her shoulders. "I've managed just fine on my own." The words came out more defensively than she'd intended. A ghost of a smile touched Owen's lips. "Never said you hadn't, but even the most capable folks need backup sometimes." Katherine studied him more carefully. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, his gun belt well maintained. Not a drifter, then. There was something deliberate in his presence that suggested purpose rather than chance. "Why would you help me, Mr. Carter? You don't even know me." "Let's just say I've got my own reasons for being interested in Albert Harrington's affairs," Owen replied. "Now about that arm," Katherine reluctantly followed him to the doctor's office, her mind racing. Owen Carter was right about one thing: Harrington's men would be back, and in greater numbers. The question was whether this mysterious stranger was truly an ally, or just another threat she'd have to face. Dr. Miller cleaned and bandaged Katherine's wound with practiced efficiency, clucking his tongue at the growing violence in their once peaceful town. "Third gunfight this month," he muttered. "You're making powerful enemies, Katherine." "Someone has to stand up to them," Katherine replied, wincing slightly as the doctor applied antiseptic. Owen stood by the window, keeping watch on the street outside. "The doc's right, Miss Reynolds. Harrington isn't a man who takes opposition lightly." "I'm well aware," Katherine said, "but these miners, they have no voice. When they try to speak up, they lose their jobs or worse. Someone has to tell their stories." "A newspaper woman," Owen observed, sounding almost impressed. "You run the Silverdale Tribune." "I do. My father started it before he died last year." Katherine's fingers tightened around the journal in her lap. "This contains his research on Harrington's operation, documentation of claim jumping, evidence of bribes to territorial officials. Enough to ruin him if it reaches the right hands. And that's why you're still here," Owen concluded. "Most folks would have packed up and run by now." Katherine lifted her chin. "I'm not most folks, Mr. Carter." "No," he agreed, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You certainly aren't." After leaving the doctor's office, Owen insisted on escorting Katherine back to her home and print shop, a modest 2-story building on the edge of town. The shop occupied the ground floor while her living quarters were above. You should leave town for a few days, Owen suggested as they approached the building. Give things time to cool down. Katherine shook her head firmly. I can't. Tomorrow's edition needs to go out. After tonight, people will be looking for answers, and you aim to give them to them even if it gets you killed. There was no judgment in his tone, just quiet curiosity. What would you have me do? Run away. Let Harrington win. Katherine unlocked the door to her shop. The interior was dimly lit by moonlight streaming through the windows, glinting off the metal components of her printing press. Owen followed her inside, lighting a lamp. I'd have you live to fight another day. This is my fight, Katherine insisted. These people count on me. My father taught me that the truth is worth standing for, no matter the cost. Owen's expression softened. Your father sounds like a good man. He was, Katherine replied, her throat tightening unexpectedly. The best. She moved through the familiar space, checking that nothing had been disturbed in her absence. The press was intact, her type cases undisturbed. Small mercies. You planning to publish what's in that journal? Owen asked, nodding toward the book she still clutched. Not yet. I need more corroborating evidence, witnesses willing to speak on record. Katherine sighed, setting the journal down on her desk. People are afraid, Mr. Carter. Harrington controls the minds, which means he controls their livelihoods. Fear makes people silent. Owen removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. Fear's a powerful motivator, that's certain. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. But so is hope. Katherine looked up at him, surprised by the sentiment. Let me help you, Owen said. I've got experience with men like Harrington. I know how they operate. Why would you risk yourself for my cause? For strangers? Katherine asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. Owen's jaw tightened. Let's just say I've seen what happens when men like Harrington go unchallenged. The damage they leave behind. There was history there, Katherine realized, pain etched in the lines around his eyes, in the firm set of his mouth. Before she could probe further, a noise outside drew Owen's attention. In one fluid motion, he extinguished the lamp and moved to the window, drawing his gun. Someone's watching the place, he whispered. 3 men across the street. Katherine's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. There's a back way out through the storeroom. Owen shook his head. They'll have that covered too. No, we're staying put. This building's defendable. I can't just sit here and wait for them to attack, Katherine protested. Owen turned to her, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Got a gun, my father's revolver, she admitted. Upstairs. Get it? Owen instructed. And anything else of value you can't bear to leave behind. If trouble starts, we might need to make a quick exit. Katherine hurried upstairs, heart pounding. She retrieved the revolver from her bedside drawer, checking that it was loaded. From beneath her mattress, she pulled out a small cloth bag containing her savings and a locket with her parents' pictures. Last, she grabbed a satchel and stuffed in a change of clothes, her father's journal, and a small wooden box containing letters and newspaper clippings her ongoing investigation. When she returned downstairs, Owen had positioned himself by the window, occasionally peering through the curtain. They're still there, he reported, just waiting, for what? Reinforcements maybe, or for us to make a move. Owen turned to her. You know how to use that, he nodded at the revolver in her hand. My father taught me, Katherine said, her grip firm. I'm a fair shot. Owen's mouth quirked in what might have been approval. Good, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. They waited in tense silence as minutes stretched into an hour. Katherine's nerves were frayed, every creak and groan of the old building setting her on edge. Owen, by contrast, seemed perfectly at ease in the stillness, his breathing steady, his posture relaxed but alert. You've done this before, Katherine observed quietly. Waited like this. Owen glanced at her. I spent some time scouting during the war, learned to be patient. You were a soldier, Union cavalry. After that, I rode with the U.S. Marshals for a spell. He kept his voice low, eyes never leaving the window. These days, I work for the Pinkerton agency. Katherine stared at him. You're a Pinkerton detective. I am. Owen finally turned to face her fully. I was sent to investigate Harrington 6 weeks ago. There have been reports of violence against miners attempting to unionize, allegations of claim theft. The territorial governor requested an independent investigation. Why didn't you tell me this before? Wasn't sure I could trust you, Owen admitted. Needed to assess the situation first. And now I think we're on the same side, Miss Reynolds. His eyes held hers in the darkness. Your father's journal could be the evidence I need to build a case against Harrington. Katherine absorbed this information, relief washing over her that she was no longer alone in her fight. What do we do now? We get out of town, Owen said decisively. Tonight, I have a camp set up in the hills. We'll head there, plan our next move. But the paper won't do anybody any good if you're dead, Owen cut in, his tone brooking no argument. The men outside are just waiting for an excuse. They'll burn this place to the ground and claim it was an accident. Katherine knew he was right, but leaving felt like surrender. I need to take my notes, my investigation files. Pack what you can carry, Owen instructed. I'll create a diversion. When I give the signal, we'll slip out the back. Katherine hurried to gather her research, carefully selecting the most crucial documents and photographs. She had spent months building her case against Harrington, interviewing miners in secret, documenting injuries sustained in unsafe conditions, collecting evidence of wage theft. Owen checked his gun and ammunition. Ready? He asked when she returned with her expanded satchel. Katherine nodded, her throat dry. What's your diversion? Owen's smile was grim, nothing subtle. He handed her a rolled cloth. Wrap this around your face, there's going to be smoke. Minutes later, a barrel of old newspapers at the far end of the street was ablaze, drawing the attention of Harrington's men and others in the vicinity. In the chaos, Owen and Katherine slipped out the back door of the print shop and into the alley beyond. Stay close, Owen murmured, leading her through a maze of back paths and service routes, avoiding the main streets where Harrington's men might be searching. They reached the livery stable without incident. The elderly stableman, Mr. Jenkins, was dozing in a chair by the door. Mr. Jenkins, Katherine whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. I need to borrow my horse. The old man startled awake. Miss Reynolds, what's happening? I heard gunfire earlier. No time to explain, Katherine said. Please, it's urgent. Mr. Jenkins looked from her to Owen, then nodded slowly. Your mare's saddled in the third stall. I figured you might need her tonight. Thank you, Katherine said gratefully, pressing a coin into his weathered hand. Got a spare mount for me? Owen asked. Take the bay gelding, Jenkins said. Solid horse, good in the mountains. As they saddled the bay, Katherine could hear shouting from the direction of the fire. They'll realize we're gone soon. Which is why we need to be well away by then, Owen replied, checking the gelding's girth strap. You good to ride through the night? Katherine swung into her saddle with practiced ease. Lead the way, Mr. Carter. They rode hard for the first hour, taking a winding path through the foothills to throw off any pursuit. The moon provided enough light to navigate the trails, and Owen seemed to know the terrain intimately, guiding them through passages that would have been invisible to the casual observer. When they finally stopped to rest the horses by a small creek, Katherine's muscles were aching from the tension of their escape. She dismounted stiffly, leading her mare to water. You ride well, Owen observed, doing the same with his gelding. Another skill my father insisted I learn, Katherine replied. He believed a woman should be as independent as possible. Wise man, Owen said, his admiration evident. Katherine splashed cold water on her face, the reality of their situation finally sinking in. I've just abandoned my home, my business, everything I've built. Temporarily, Owen assured her. Once we bring Harrington down, you can go back. If we bring him down, Katherine corrected. He's powerful, connected. Owen approached, stopping just short of where she knelt by the creek. You're having doubts now, after all you've risked, Katherine looked up at him, moonlight silvering his features. Not doubts, just acknowledging the odds. Owen offered her his hand, pulling her to her feet. The odds don't matter when the cause is just. And you've already proven you're not afraid to stand alone against them. His confidence warmed something inside her. Not alone anymore, it seems. They stood like that for a moment, hands still clasped, the night air electric between them. Then Owen stepped back, clearing his throat. We should keep moving. My camp's another hour's ride. The camp proved to be a well-hidden cabin tucked into a dense grove of pines, nearly invisible until they were upon it. It was small but solidly built, with a stone chimney and sturdy door. "Trapper's cabin," Owen explained as he dismounted. "Abandoned years ago. I've been using it as a base while investigating Harrington." Inside was spare but comfortable a table and chairs, a small stove, a narrow bed, and a chest for supplies. Maps and documents were pinned to one wall, connected by pieces of string, forming a complex web of relationships and transactions. "Your investigation," Katherine said, approaching the wall with interest. Some of the names she recognized, others were new to her. "Been at it for weeks," Owen confirmed, lighting a lantern. "Harrington's built quite an empire through intimidation and corruption." Katherine pulled out her father's journal. This might help fill in some gaps. They spent the next few hours comparing notes, Katherine marveling at how their separate investigations complemented each other. Owen had traced Harrington's financial dealings and political connections, while her father's journal and her own research detailed the human cost of his operations: injured miners, denied compensation, families evicted from company housing after speaking out, claims stolen through legal manipulation. "This is enough," Owen said finally, sitting back from the table where they'd spread their combined evidence. "More than enough. With this, we can bring it to the federal authorities." "We tried that," Katherine reminded him. "The local marshal is on Harrington's payroll." "Not the local law," Owen said. "I'm talking about taking it all the way to Denver to the federal court. I have contacts there who can't be bought." Katherine rubbed her tired eyes. "It's a 4-day ride to Denver, 3 if we push hard," Owen countered, "but first we need rest." It's been a long night. Only then did Katherine realize dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the cabin's single window. Exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Owen gestured to the bed. "Take it. I'll keep watch," Katherine wanted to protest, but fatigue made her limbs heavy. "Wake me in a few hours. We should take turns." Owen nodded, though something in his expression suggested he had no intention of waking her until she'd had proper rest. Katherine removed her boots and lay down, the bed surprisingly comfortable. Despite her racing thoughts, sleep claimed her almost immediately. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of a fire crackling in the stove. Disoriented, she sat up quickly, reaching instinctively for her father's revolver. "Easy," Owen said from where he sat at the table, cleaning his gun. "You're safe." Katherine relaxed, noting that the light outside suggested late afternoon. "You let me sleep all day." "You needed it," Owen replied simply. "Coffee's hot if you want some." Katherine accepted the cup he offered, the strong brew reviving her senses. "Did you sleep at all?" "I can go a couple of days if needed," he said with a shrug. "Military training." Katherine studied him in the daylight. His features were strong, the lines around his eyes speaking of both hardship and laughter. There was a small scar at his temple, nearly hidden by his dark hair, and his hands bore the marks of a man accustomed to hard work. "What?" he asked, noticing her scrutiny. "Just wondering what brings a Pinkerton detective to this fight," Katherine admitted. "Is it just an assignment to you?" Owen set down his cleaning cloth. "It started that way," he acknowledged, "but some cases become personal, and this one did." Owen was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "I grew up in a mining town in Pennsylvania. My father worked the coal seams for 20 years before the dust took his lungs. The company doctors said it wasn't their responsibility, that he'd been careless." His jaw tightened. "He died slow, gasping for air that wouldn't come. We lost everything, our home, our savings, just trying to keep him comfortable at the end." Katherine's heart ached for the boy he must have been. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," Owen said, though the pain in his voice suggested otherwise. "But men like Harrington, they're the same everywhere. They see people as tools to be used and discarded. They don't understand the human cost of their greed." "That's why I couldn't leave," Katherine said softly. "These people trusted my father to be their voice. Now they trust me." Owen's expression softened. "Your father would be proud of the stand you're taking." "Sometimes I wonder," Katherine confessed. "He was passionate about justice, but he was also practical. He might say I'm being foolish, risking everything on principle." "Principles are all we have sometimes," Owen replied. "They're what separate us from men like Harrington." Their eyes met across the table, understanding passing between them. In that moment, Katherine felt the first stirrings of something more than alliance, a connection rooted in shared values and mutual respect. The moment was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Owen was on his feet instantly, gun in hand, motioning for Katherine to stay low. "Riders coming," he said quietly. "At least 3. Katherine drew her revolver, heart pounding. "Harrington's men, maybe." Owen moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. "They're still too far to make out. How did they find us?" Katherine whispered. "Someone must have seen which way we headed," Owen theorized, "or they're just searching the hills systematically." He moved efficiently around the cabin, gathering their most essential documents and supplies. "There's a cellar trapdoor under the rug. If they get close, that's where you hide." "I'm not hiding while you face them alone," Katherine protested. Owen turned to her, his expression fierce. "This isn't about bravery, Katherine. It's about protecting the evidence. If we both go down, all of this was for nothing." The use of her first name startled her as much as the logic of his argument. Reluctantly, she nodded. "All right, but I'll be ready to help if needed." The riders drew closer, and Owen's tension visibly increased. "Only 2 horses," he reported, "but they're coming straight for us." Katherine moved to his side, peering through the window. Through the trees, she could make out 2 mounted figures approaching at a steady pace. Then one of them called out, "Hello, the cabin. Dr. Miller sent us." Owen and Katherine exchanged glances. "Miller," she whispered. "The doctor who treated your arm," Owen reminded her. "I know him," Katherine said. "He's not one of Harrington's men." Owen still looked wary. "Stay inside," he instructed, moving to the door with his gun at the ready. From the doorway, he called out, "That's far enough. State your business." The riders halted about 50 yards from the cabin. One raised his hands to show he was unarmed. "Name's Jackson Taylor, town blacksmith." "This here's Tom Wilson, works the Silverdale mine. Doc Miller said you might need warning." "Warning about what?" Owen demanded. "Harrington's hired a crew of gunmen from Denver," Taylor shouted back. "They're sweeping the hills looking for Miss Reynolds, got a bounty on her head, dead or alive." Katherine felt ice form in her stomach. Dead or alive. Harrington had escalated beyond intimidation to outright murder. Owen seemed to make a decision. "Come ahead slowly," he called to the men. As they approached, Katherine recognized them both, honest men who had occasionally helped her father with information about conditions in the mines. Jackson Taylor dismounted first, his weathered face grave. "Miss Reynolds, glad to see you're alive. Town's in an uproar since last night." "What happened after we left?" Katherine asked. "Harrington's men ransacked your print shop," Wilson said, removing his hat respectfully. "When they couldn't find you or your father's journal, they started threatening folks, saying anyone harboring you would hang. Doc Miller patched up one of Harrington's boys who got shot in the scuffle last night," Taylor continued. "Heard him talking about how they'd tracked you heading this way. Doc sent us to warn you." "How many gunmen?" Owen asked, all business. "At least 10, Wilson replied. "Mean-looking bunch. They're combing these hills as we speak." "We need to move," Owen decided, turning to Katherine. "We can't stay here." "Where will you go?" Taylor asked. "They've got men watching all the trails to Denver." "Not all of them," Owen said confidently. "There are paths through these mountains that only locals know," Wilson nodded. "I know a few myself. Used to hunt these hills before I took up mining. I can guide you partway." "It's too dangerous," Katherine protested. "Harrington will retaliate against anyone who helps us." "With respect, Miss Reynolds," Taylor said firmly, "some things are worth the risk. What you're doing standing up to Harrington, it's given folks hope. We aim to see you succeed." Katherine was moved by their loyalty. "Thank you." Owen stepped forward. "We need to leave within the hour." "How far ahead of Harrington's men are you?" "Half a day, maybe less," Wilson said. "We came the long way around to avoid being followed." "Good," Owen said approvingly. "Here's what we'll do." An hour later, Katherine and Owen were following Wilson along a nearly invisible trail through a dense section of forest, climbing steadily higher into the mountains. Taylor had ridden in the opposite direction, creating a false trail to draw Harrington's men away. The path was treacherous in places, forcing them to dismount and lead their horses over particularly rough terrain. Katherine's arms ached from guiding her mare over fallen logs and around tight switchbacks, but she pressed on without complaint. Wilson proved to be a valuable guide, pointing out landmarks and warning of dangerous sections ahead. By nightfall, they had put considerable distance between themselves and any pursuit. "We'll camp here," Wilson decided, indicating a small clearing sheltered by towering pines. "There's a spring nearby for water, and the trees will hide our fire from below." They made camp efficiently, Owen taking charge of the horses while Katherine and Wilson gathered wood for a small, carefully banked fire. The night air was cool at this elevation, the stars brilliant overhead. As they sat around the fire eating a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, Wilson shared what news he had of events in town. "Harrington's getting desperate," he said. "The territorial inspectors due next month, and rumors are spreading about unsafe conditions in the mines." "Your articles have folks talking, Miss Reynolds. That's all I wanted," Katherine said, "for people to question, to demand better." "It's working," Wilson assured her. "Even some of the men who were afraid to speak up before are finding their courage." Owen stirred the fire with a stick. "Harrington knows his time's running out. That's why he's so determined to silence you." "And recover the journal," Katherine added. "It contains evidence of bribes he paid to keep previous inspections favorable." Wilson nodded grimly. "That sounds like Harrington." "Man's got half the territorial officials in his pocket." "Not all of them," Owen said. "There are still honest men in Denver. Once we get there with our evidence, Harrington's reign ends." They took turns keeping watch through the night, Katherine insisting on taking her share of the duty despite Owen's initial reluctance. During her watch, she sat wrapped in a blanket, the stars wheeling overhead, contemplating how quickly her life had changed. Just 2 days ago, she had been a newspaper editor in a small mining town, continuing her father's work, fighting her battles through words and ink. Now she was a fugitive with a price on her head, riding through wilderness with a Pinkerton detective toward an uncertain confrontation in Denver. And yet, despite the danger, she felt more alive than she had in months. The grief that had shadowed her since her father's death had lifted somewhat, replaced by a sense of purpose and, surprisingly, hope. Owen stirred from where he slept nearby, sitting up to join her by the fire. "Anything?" he asked quietly. "All quiet," Katherine reported. "Just the usual night sounds." Owen added wood to the fire, the flames illuminating his face in warm light. "Wilson knows these mountains well, says we can reach the old Ute Trail by tomorrow evening. And from there, 2 days to Denver if we push hard." Owen glanced at her. "Think you can manage it?" Katherine raised an eyebrow. "I'm tougher than I look, Mr. Carter." "I never doubted that," he replied, a smile playing at his lips. "And I think we're past Mr. Carter and Miss Reynolds, don't you?" Katherine smiled in return. "I suppose we are." "Owen," they sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. "What will you do after?" Owen asked eventually. "When this is over." Katherine had been pondering the same question. "Return to Silverdale, I hope." "Rebuild the newspaper. There are still stories that need telling." Owen nodded. "The town's lucky to have you." "And you?" Katherine asked. "Back to the Pinkerton agency for another assignment." Owen stared into the flames, considering. "I've been thinking it might be time for a change." "Find somewhere to put down roots." "You'd leave detective work behind." "Not necessarily," Owen said. "Just the constant traveling. A man gets tired of having nowhere to call home." Katherine studied his profile, wondering at the future he envisioned. "Silverdale could use a good lawman," she suggested, her heart beating a little faster at her own boldness. "The current marshal is likely to find himself unemployed once Harrington falls." Owen's eyes met hers across the fire, something warm kindling in their depths. "Are you offering me a job, Katherine?" "Just noting an opportunity," she replied with a lightness she didn't entirely feel. "The town newspaper might even give you a favorable write-up." Owen's smile deepened. "I'll keep that in mind." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Wilson stirred in his bedroll, reminding them they weren't alone. "Get some rest," Owen said softly. "I'll take the watch now." Katherine nodded, retreating to her bedroll, but sleep was slow to come. Her mind kept returning to the look in Owen's eyes, to the futures they might both be contemplating. They broke camp at first light, Wilson leading them higher into the mountains. The terrain grew increasingly rugged, the air thinner and cooler as they climbed. By midday, they had reached a ridge that offered a sweeping view of the valley below. There, Wilson said, pointing to a thin column of smoke rising from the trees several miles back along their trail. Harrington's men, I'd wager. Owen studied the smoke through a small spyglass. 4, maybe 5 riders. They've picked up our trail. How far to the Ute Path? Katherine asked Wilson. Another 4 hours at this pace, the miner replied, but it's rough going from here. Owen's expression was grim. They're moving faster than we can with these horses. They'll gain on us. Then I'll stay behind, Wilson decided. Lead them away from your trail. No, Katherine protested immediately. It's too dangerous. Miss Reynolds is right, Owen agreed. We're not risking your life. Wilson shook his head stubbornly. I know these mountains better than any of Harrington's hired guns. I can lose them, then circle back to town a different way. Owen and Katherine exchanged glances, both recognizing the logic but reluctant to accept the risk to their guide. I owe it to your father, Wilson said to Katherine, his expression solemn. He spoke up for me when Harrington tried to blame me for the collapse in the North Shaft last year, saved my reputation, maybe my life. Let me do this. Finally, Owen nodded. If you're certain, but be careful. These aren't just thugs, they're professional gunmen. I'll be fine, Wilson assured them. Just get that evidence to Denver. Make Harrington pay for what he's done to our town. They parted ways an hour later, Wilson taking Katherine's mare and heading east along a visible trail while Katherine doubled up with Owen on his gelding, continuing north toward the old Ute Path. The farewell was brief but heartfelt, Katherine embracing the gruff miner who had risked so much to help them. Godspeed, Wilson said, tipping his hat before turning his horse and riding away. Owen and Katherine watched until he disappeared among the trees. Brave man, Owen said quietly. He is, Katherine agreed, her throat tight. They all are the miners, working in darkness and danger for barely enough to feed their families. Owen helped her mount behind him on the gelding. Then let's make sure their courage isn't wasted. They rode hard for the rest of the day, the added weight slowing the gelding, but not as much as having 2 separate mounts navigating the difficult terrain. Katherine held onto Owen's waist, conscious of his solid presence before her, the rhythm of their shared movement as the horse picked its way through the wilderness. By evening, they reached the Ute Trail, an ancient path used by the native tribes for generations before white settlers arrived. It was narrow but well established, winding its way through passes that would otherwise be impassable. We'll make better time from here, Owen said as they dismounted to make camp for the night. With luck, we'll reach Denver by sundown the day after tomorrow. They ate a spare meal, both too exhausted for much conversation. The day's hard riding had taken its toll, and the anxiety of being pursued added to their fatigue. When Owen suggested they should sleep in shifts again, Katherine agreed without argument. I'll take first watch, Owen said. You get some rest. Katherine nodded, spreading her bedroll near the small fire they had built. Despite her exhaustion, she found herself watching Owen as he moved around their campsite, checking their supplies, ensuring the horse was properly hobbled and fed. Owen, she said softly, thank you. For everything, he paused, turning to look at her. No need for thanks, I'm just doing my job. Is that all this is to you? Katherine asked. A job? Owen was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the firelight. Then he moved to kneel beside her bedroll. No, he said simply. It's much more than that now. Their eyes held, the admission hanging between them like a tangible thing. Katherine reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek in a tentative caress. Owen caught her hand in his touch gentle but firm. Katherine, he said, his voice rough with emotion. When this is over, she echoed, we'll have time to figure it out, together. He nodded, bringing her hand to his lips in a gesture that spoke volumes. Together, he agreed. The following morning brought clear skies and renewed determination. They set out at first light, the gelding refreshed after a night's rest. The trail was easier going now, allowing them to maintain a steady pace. By mid-afternoon, they had descended from the high country into more rolling terrain. Denver was still a day's ride away, but both felt their spirits lifting as they drew closer to their destination and safety. As they stopped to rest the horse by a small stream, Katherine noticed Owen scanning their back trail, his expression concerned. "What is it?" she asked. "Not sure," he admitted. "Just a feeling. We should keep moving." They had just remounted when the first shot rang out, the bullet splintering bark from a tree inches from Owen's head. Katherine gasped as Owen instantly spurred the gelding into motion, leaning low over the horse's neck. "Hang on." He shouted as more shots followed them. Katherine clung to him as the gelding galloped down the trail, branches whipping past them. She could hear the thunder of pursuing hooves, gaining on their overburdened mount. "They're too fast," she cried. "We can't outrun them." Owen guided the horse off the trail into a dense copse of trees, momentarily breaking line of sight with their pursuers. He reined in sharply, dismounting and helping Katherine down. "Take the satchel," he instructed, handing her the bag containing their evidence. "Follow the trail north. It's about 15 miles to the next settlement. Find the telegraph office, send a message to Marshal James Thornton in Denver. The code phrase is 'Silver runs deep.'" "What about you?" Katherine demanded, even as she accepted the satchel. Owen checked his gun. "I'll hold them off, give you a head start." "No," Katherine gripped his arm. "I'm not leaving you to face them alone." Owen looked at her, his expression softening despite the danger. "Katherine, the evidence is what matters. It's bigger than both of us." "You matter to me," Katherine said fiercely. "We do this together or not at all." Before Owen could argue further, the sound of approaching riders grew louder. They both froze, listening. The hoofbeats slowed, then stopped altogether. "They're searching," Owen whispered. "Looking for where we left the trail." Katherine's mind raced. The thick underbrush provided temporary cover, but they couldn't stay hidden forever. The gelding, though trained to be quiet, might still give away their position. "How many?" she whispered. 3, maybe 4, Owen estimated. "Too many to fight head-on." Katherine looked around desperately, then pointed to a rocky outcropping about 50 yards away. "There, it provides cover and higher ground." Owen nodded approvingly. "Good thinking. I'll take the horse further in, create a false trail, meet you at the rocks." Katherine slipped through the trees toward the outcropping, the satchel clutched tightly to her chest. Behind her, she heard Owen moving with the gelding in a different direction. Her heart pounded as she reached the rocks, scrambling up to find a defensible position. From her vantage point, she could see movement in the trees below, riders moving cautiously along the trail, scanning the forest. 4 men, heavily armed, their expressions hard and determined. Hired killers, just as Wilson had warned. Katherine drew her father's revolver, checking that it was fully loaded. She had 5 shots, not enough to take on 4 armed men, but perhaps enough to create a diversion if needed. She watched anxiously for Owen, finally spotting him approaching from a different angle than the one he'd taken with the horse. He moved silently through the underbrush, his experience as a scout evident in every careful step. When he reached the rocks, Katherine helped pull him up to her position. "They're spreading out," she whispered. "Searching systematically." Owen nodded grimly. "Won't take them long to find us. We need a plan," Katherine thought quickly. "The satchel is what matters. If we separate, one of us might get through." "I don't like the idea of splitting up," Owen said, his brow furrowed. "Neither do I," Katherine admitted, "but we may not have a choice." Before they could decide, a shout from below indicated that one of the men had found their gelding's tracks. The hunters began to converge on the area where Owen had left the horse. "That won't distract them for long," Owen muttered. "We need to move." They scrambled over the rocks, staying low to avoid being silhouetted against the sky. The terrain sloped upward, offering a route away from their pursuers, but also leaving them increasingly exposed as the tree cover thinned. They had just reached a small plateau when a shot rang out behind them. Katherine felt a burning sensation across her upper arm as a bullet grazed her, tearing her sleeve. "Katherine?" Owen pulled her behind a boulder, his face pale with concern. "I'm all right," she gasped, though the wound stung fiercely. "Just a graze." Owen tore a strip from his shirt, quickly binding the wound. "We're running out of options," he said, his voice tight. "They have the high ground now." Katherine looked around desperately. The plateau offered little cover beyond scattered boulders and stunted trees. Ahead, the terrain dropped away sharply, a cliff face too steep to descend quickly. "We're trapped," she realized. Owen's jaw set in a hard line. Not yet, we're not. He peered around the boulder. There's a narrow path along the cliff edge. If we can reach it, we might find a way down. They made a dash for the cliff edge, bullets kicking up dust at their heels. The path Owen had spotted was little more than a deer trail, barely wide enough for single file, hugging the cliff face with a dizzying drop on one side. Go, Owen urged, letting Katherine take the lead. I'll cover our retreat. Katherine hesitated, torn between the need to protect their evidence and her fear for Owen's safety. Promise you'll follow. I promise, he said, his eyes holding hers for a brief, intense moment. Katherine started down the narrow path, the satchel secure across her body, her injured arm throbbing with every movement. Behind her, she heard Owen fire several shots, the reports echoing off the cliff face. The path wound downward, occasionally disappearing altogether where rockslides had erased sections. Katherine picked her way carefully, aware that one misstep could send her plunging to the rocks below. She had descended perhaps 50 feet when she heard a commotion above. Glancing up, she saw Owen engaged in a desperate struggle with one of their pursuers who had reached the cliff edge. The two men grappled at the precipice, too close for either to use their weapons. Owen, Katherine cried out in alarm. The sound of her voice seemed to give Owen renewed strength. With a powerful move, he broke the other man's grip and shoved him away from the edge. The pursuer stumbled backward, losing his footing on the loose gravel. But as Owen turned toward the path, another of Harrington's men appeared, raising his gun. Katherine watched in horror as Owen dove for cover, the bullet striking the cliff face where he had stood moments before. Rocks and debris cascaded down, some striking Katherine as she pressed herself against the cliff. Keep going, Owen shouted down to her. I'll find another way. Tears blurring her vision, Katherine continued her descent. The path grew steeper, forcing her to use both hands to steady herself, the pain in her injured arm almost unbearable. Above, the sound of gunfire continued sporadically. Katherine tried to focus on her footing on the task at hand, but her mind was filled with fear for Owen. Had he found another route down? Was he even still alive? When she finally reached the bottom of the cliff, Katherine found herself in a narrow ravine. Stunned and exhausted, she leaned against the rock face, trying to gather her strength. The satchel with their evidence was still secure, but at what cost? A noise from above made her look up. Relief flooded through her as she saw Owen making his way down the cliff face, finding handholds where no path existed. He was moving awkwardly, and with a jolt of fear, she realized he was injured. When he reached the bottom, he collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. Blood darkened the side of his shirt. Owen, Katherine was at his side instantly. You're hurt. It's not bad, he insisted, though his face was gray with pain. Bullet grazed my ribs. The other two are still up there, but they'll be looking for an easier way down. We need to keep moving. Katherine helped him to his feet, supporting his weight as they moved deeper into the ravine. There must be a stream nearby, she said, noting the vegetation growing along the ravine floor. We can follow it out. They stumbled along for what seemed like hours, Owen growing increasingly weak from blood loss. Katherine's own wound throbbed painfully, but she pushed aside her discomfort, focused only on putting distance between themselves and their pursuers. As dusk began to fall, they found the stream Katherine had predicted, its clear water a blessing for their parched throats. Owen sank down on the bank, no longer able to hide his exhaustion. We need to tend your wound, Katherine insisted, helping him remove his shirt. The bullet had indeed grazed his ribs, leaving a deep furrow that bled steadily. Katherine used water from the stream to clean it as best she could, then bound it tightly with strips torn from her petticoat. My father always said petticoats were a woman's most versatile tool, she joked weakly, trying to distract them both from the gravity of their situation. Owen managed a smile despite his pain. Wise man, your father. Once his wound was bandaged, Katherine helped Owen drink, then refilled their single canteen. We should rest here tonight, she decided. It's getting too dark to travel safely. Owen nodded, too weak to argue. Katherine helped him to a sheltered spot, beneath an overhang in the ravine wall, then gathered what materials she could find to create a semblance of comfort pine boughs for bedding. stones arranged to reflect the minimal heat from a tiny, carefully shielded fire. As night closed in around them, Katherine sat beside Owen, her mind racing with contingency plans. They were still at least a day's journey from Denver, on foot and injured. Harrington's men would surely continue their pursuit at first light. "We'll make it," Owen said softly, as if reading her thoughts. Katherine looked down at him, surprised to find his eyes open, watching her. "You should be resting." "Hard to rest with you worrying so loudly," he replied, his attempt at humor undermined by the strain in his voice. Katherine managed a small smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to me." Owen reached for her hand, his grip warm despite his weakness. "Katherine, if something happens tomorrow, don't," she interrupted, squeezing his hand. "We're both going to make it. I won't accept any other outcome." Owen's expression softened. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Katherine Reynolds. I knew it from the moment I saw you ducking behind that wagon, clutching your father's journal like it was more precious than your own life." "It wasn't strength," Katherine admitted. "It was fear and stubbornness." "Strength isn't the absence of fear," Owen said gently. "It's continuing despite it." Katherine leaned down, resting her forehead against his. "Then be strong for me now. Rest, heal. We have a long way to go tomorrow." Owen lifted his hand to her cheek, his touch feather-light. "They think you're weak," he murmured, his eyes holding hers in the firelight. "What?" Katherine drew back slightly puzzled. "Harrington and his men," Owen clarified. "They think you're weak because you're a woman. That's why they underestimated you, why they thought they could intimidate you into silence." Katherine considered this, recognizing the truth in his words. "Perhaps they did. Sometimes I felt weak facing them alone." Owen's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Then let them see my strength in you," he said softly, "and yours in me. Together, we're more than either of us alone." The simple truth of it stole Katherine's breath. Impulsively, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his. A gentle kiss that conveyed everything she couldn't find words for: fear and hope, gratitude and something deeper, something still taking shape between them. When she pulled back, Owen was looking at her with wonder. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment you stood up to me in your print shop," he confessed. Katherine laughed softly. "I thought you were insufferably arrogant." "I thought you were impossibly brave," he countered, his smile warming his tired features. They talked quietly as the night deepened around them, sharing stories of their lives before they met. Katherine told him about growing up as a newspaper man's daughter, learning to set type before she could write cursive, accompanying her father on interviews from the time she was 12. Owen spoke of his years with the Pinkertons, the cases that had taken him across the country, the injustices he had witnessed and sometimes helped rectify. Eventually, exhaustion overtook them both. Katherine curled beside Owen, her head resting on his uninjured side, his arm around her shoulders. Despite their precarious situation, she felt a profound sense of peace, of rightness. "Tomorrow," she murmured as sleep claimed her, "we reach Denver. Together." Morning brought renewed strength and determination. Owen's wound, while still painful, had stopped bleeding and his color was better. Katherine's own injury was a dull ache rather than the sharp pain of the previous day. They broke their meager camp and followed the stream, which gradually widened as it flowed down from the mountains. By mid-morning, they spotted what appeared to be a logging road running parallel to the water. "This will lead to a settlement eventually," Owen said, his voice stronger than it had been the night before. "Might even find a farmer or trapper willing to lend us horses." They had been following the road for perhaps an hour when the distant sound of hoofbeats made them both freeze. Exchanging a quick glance, they ducked into the cover of trees alongside the road, hearts pounding. "Riders coming," Owen whispered, drawing his gun despite his injury. "At least two," Katherine nodded, clutching the satchel tightly. "If it's Harrington's men." "We'll handle it," Owen assured her, though they both knew their chances against armed riders were slim. The hoofbeats grew louder. Katherine held her breath as the riders came into view around a bend in the road, then she gasped in surprise. "It's Wilson," she exclaimed, recognizing the miner who had guided them. Beside him rode a tall man in a marshal's uniform. Before Owen could caution her, Katherine stepped out onto the road, waving her arms. "Wilson, here!" The riders spotted her immediately, spurring their horses toward them. Owen emerged more cautiously from the trees, his gun still at the ready. "Miss Reynolds, Mr. Carter," Wilson called as he drew near. "Thank God we found you." The marshal beside him surveyed them with sharp eyes, taking in their disheveled appearance and injuries. "James Thornton, U.S. Marshal," he introduced himself. "Looks like I arrived just in time." "How did you find us?" Owen asked, holstering his weapon as he recognized Thornton's name, the Denver marshal he had instructed Katherine to contact. Wilson dismounted, his weathered face creased with worry. "After I led Harrington's men away, I circled back toward town. Ran into a Pinkerton man asking questions about you two. When I told him what happened, he telegraphed Marshal Thornton. Harrington's men are still after us," Katherine informed them. "At least two, maybe more." Thornton nodded grimly. "We've got a posse coming up behind us. They'll deal with any stragglers." He surveyed their injuries. "You two need medical attention. Can you ride?" With Wilson and Thornton's assistance, they mounted the spare horses the marshal had brought. Katherine's arm protested the movement, but the prospect of reaching safety outweighed the discomfort. As they rode toward Denver, Katherine keeping close to Owen's side, Wilson explained what had transpired in Silverdale after their departure. "Towns turned against Harrington," he reported with satisfaction. "After his men burned the print shop, folks started speaking out. Miners walked off the job yesterday, demanding better conditions." "The fire, was anyone hurt?" Katherine asked anxiously. "No, madam." "But it was the last straw for many. They've had enough of living under Harrington's thumb." Marshal Thornton listened with interest. "We've been building a case against Harrington for months. Your evidence might be the final piece we need." Katherine patted the satchel that hadn't left her side through their entire ordeal. "It's all here: financial records, witness statements, my father's journal detailing years of corruption and intimidation. And I've got my own investigation files to add to it," Owen put in, his voice strained but determined. They reached Denver by nightfall, Katherine marveling at the city's gas-lit streets and substantial buildings after the smaller scale of Silverdale. Marshal Thornton led them directly to his office, where a doctor was summoned to tend their injuries. As her arm was properly cleaned and bandaged, Katherine watched Owen giving his preliminary report to Thornton, laying out the evidence they had gathered. Despite his exhaustion and injury, his account was precise and professional, his commitment to justice unwavering. Pride swelled in her chest. This was a man who understood her fight, because it was his own, as well, a battle not just against one corrupt businessman, but against the systemic exploitation that allowed men like Harrington to flourish. When the formalities were completed and their statements recorded, Thornton assured them that warrants would be issued immediately for Harrington's arrest. "We've got enough here to put him away for years," the marshal said with satisfaction. "Your father would be proud, Miss Reynolds." Katherine smiled tiredly. "Thank you, Marshal. That means more than you know." They were provided rooms at a nearby hotel with guards posted in the hallway as a precaution. After days of danger and rough living, the clean sheets and soft mattress seemed like unimaginable luxury to Katherine. Yet sleep eluded her. Her mind kept returning to Owen, to the kiss they had shared, to the future that suddenly seemed possible. Would he return to his work with the Pinkertons once Harrington was behind bars, or had he meant what he'd said about putting down roots? A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Wrapping a borrowed robe around her nightdress, she approached cautiously. "Who is it, Owen?" came the quiet response. Katherine opened the door to find him standing there, similarly attired in a borrowed nightshirt and robe. His face was freshly shaved, his hair still damp from bathing, but exhaustion lined his features. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. Katherine stepped back, inviting him in. "Neither could I." They sat together on the small sofa in her room, the lamplight casting soft shadows across their faces. For a moment, neither spoke, content just to be in each other's presence without the immediate threat of danger. "Thornton says they'll move against Harrington tomorrow," Owen finally said. "With the evidence we provided and the statements from Wilson and others, he'll be in custody by nightfall." "It hardly seems real," Katherine murmured. "After all this time, all the fear and fighting, it's almost over." Owen took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The question is, what comes next for you for Silverdale? Rebuilding, Katherine said without hesitation. The newspaper first. The town will need a voice more than ever as it recovers from Harrington's influence. Owen nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. It's a big job for one person. Is it? Katherine's heart quickened. I was thinking I might have helped. Were you now? A smile played at the corners of Owen's mouth. Katherine gathered her courage. A former Pinkerton detective might make an excellent investigative reporter, or perhaps a town marshal once the current one is removed from office. Interesting possibilities, Owen agreed, his voice softening. But I was thinking of something more permanent, more personal. He shifted closer, taking both her hands in his. Katherine, when I thought I might lose you on that cliff, I realized something. All these years I've been moving from place to place, case to case, I've been searching for something I couldn't name, a purpose, a home. His eyes held hers, sincere and vulnerable. I found both in you. Katherine's breath caught in her throat. Owen, I know it's fast, he acknowledged. We've known each other barely a week, but some things you just know, deep down where it matters. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. I love you, Katherine Reynolds, your courage, your conviction, your unyielding spirit. If you'll have me, I want to build a life with you in Silverdale or anywhere else. Tears welled in Katherine's eyes, but they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. They thought I was weak, she whispered, echoing his words from the night before. Owen's smile deepened with understanding. And I said, let them see my strength in you. Yes, Katherine said simply, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. Yes to everything, Owen, I love you too. His kiss was gentle at first, mindful of their injuries, but it deepened as Katherine drew him closer, pouring all her emotions into the embrace. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Owen rested his forehead against hers. Partner, he said softly. In every way, Katherine agreed. 3 months later, Katherine stood in the doorway of the rebuilt Silverdale Tribune, watching with satisfaction as Owen showed a young apprentice how to set type for the next day's edition. The printing press, newer and more efficient than her old one, hummed steadily in the background. Silverdale was changing rapidly. With Harrington in prison awaiting trial and his assets seized, the mines had been reorganized as a cooperative, with the miners themselves having a voice in operations and safety measures. The town was growing, attracting new businesses and families drawn by reports of fair working conditions and opportunities. Owen had declined the offer to become town marshal, preferring to work alongside Katherine at the newspaper. His investigative skills proved invaluable as they expanded their coverage beyond Silverdale to neighboring communities. Together, they were building a reputation for fearless reporting and unwavering integrity. Their wedding had been a simple affair 2 months prior, with Dr. Miller officiating and half the town in attendance. They lived in the apartment above the print shop, just as Katherine had before, but it felt entirely different with Owen there, warmer, more like home than it had ever been. As if sensing her gaze, Owen looked up from his work, his smile immediate and warm. Katherine returned it, her heart full. They had faced death together and emerged stronger. They had brought down a corrupt empire and helped build something better in its place. But most importantly, they had found in each other what both had been seeking: not just love, but partnership, understanding, and the courage to create a future neither could have imagined alone. You're staring, Mrs. Carter, Owen called teasingly. Just admiring the view, Mr. Carter, Katherine replied with a laugh. As she joined them at the press, Katherine knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, her strength in him, his strength in her, inseparable and undefeated.